The night she was left behind, the desert didn't scream, it breathed at a slow, hollow wind moved through shattered rock and burned-out compounds, carrying the smell of cordite, blood, and dust that never truly settled. The stars above were cruelly bright, uncaring witnesses to a battlefield that had already decided who mattered and who didn't. Captain Mara Hale lay half-buried behind a collapsed mud wall, her left leg twisted beneath her at an angle that no human joint should ever allow. The pain had come and gone in violent waves, but now it lived in her bones, steady and deep, like something permanent. Her radio crackled once, then went dead. She didn't cry out. She didn't curse. She just closed her eyes for a moment and let the silence wash over her. Extraction had been 6 minutes away when the ambush hit point 6 minutes. The convoy had slowed to clear a choke point, standard procedure, drilled into them from day one. The explosion came from beneath the lead vehicle, flipping 20 tons of armor like a child's toy. Gunfire followed instantly, precise and overwhelming. Not militia, not amateurs. This was a trap. Mara had moved without thinking, dragging a wounded corporal out of the kill zone while returning fire with controlled bursts. She remembered shouting coordinates. She remembered calling in air support. She remembered the moment a second explosion threw her into the wall and turned the world white. After that, everything fractured. Now, hours later, she was alone. The mission had been scrubbed. Air support redirected. The surviving team had been forced to pull back under heavy fire. Command would call it a tactical withdrawal down on the ground. It felt like abandonment. Mara reached for her radio again, fingers trembling as she adjusted the antenna, tried a different frequency. Static hissed like mockery. Mayday! Mayday! This is Hale, call sign Iron Sparrow. I am wounded, unable to move. Her voice echoed back to her, swallowed by the night. She waited. Nothing. Enemy territory stretched for miles in every direction. Dawn was still hours away, but she knew what daylight would bring. Search parties, dogs, men who would not take prisoners. She checked her weapon. 3 magazines left. Sidearm intact. 1 smoke grenade. No morphine. No tourniquet that could fix what was wrong with her leg. She tore a strip from her uniform anyway and tied it tight, biting down hard to keep from screaming as she set the bone as best she could. Pain exploded through her vision. She breathed through it. Stay alive, she told herself. Just stay alive. Mara had survived 2 tours, Black Ops insertions, and missions no one would ever officially acknowledge. She had earned her place in units that didn't welcome women easily and trusted them even less. But out here, rank meant nothing. Hours passed in fragments. She drifted in and out, jolting awake at distant sounds, footsteps, voices carried by the wind, the metallic click of a rifle bolt far too close to T1 point. She heard laughter. She pressed herself deeper into the rubble, finger on the trigger, heart hammering so hard she was sure it would give her away. They passed without seeing her. When the sky began to lighten, she knew her chances were shrinking. She forced herself upright, gritting her teeth, and raised the radio again. The battery indicator blinked red. One last time, she whispered. She switched to a long-range emergency frequency, one rarely monitored except by units deep in hostile zones. This is Captain Mara Hale, Iron Sparrow. If anyone can hear me, I am wounded and pinned. Grid coordinates, the radio crackled. Not static, a voice. Say again. Unknown caller. Repeat transmission. Mara froze. Her throat tightened. This is Iron Sparrow, she said louder now, stronger. I am wounded. I was left during an extraction failure. I have enemy movement in the area. I need immediate assistance. There was a pause, then Iron Sparrow, stand by. She exhaled, a shaky breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Miles away, a 6-man recon team halted in their tracks. They weren't supposed to be there. Task Force Sentinel had been inserted for long-range surveillance, not rescue. Their orders were clear: observe, report, avoid contact. They had been operating off-grid for days, living on ration crumbs and filtered mud water, ghosts moving through hostile terrain. Sergeant Lucas Reed lifted his hand, signaling the team to freeze. Say that again, he murmured into his headset. Did you hear that? Yeah, whispered Corporal Jean Park. Female voice. Military cadence. Reed frowned. The frequency she'd come through on was old. Nearly abandoned. Only someone trained would even think to use it. Command didn't mention any missing personnel, Park added. Reed already knew that, which means, he said quietly, someone didn't make it out. The radio crackled again, weaker now. Battery failing. Please, if you hear this, Reed didn't hesitate. This is Sentinel-1, he transmitted. Iron Sparrow, we hear you. Sit tight. Do not move unless necessary. Repeat, do not move. On the other end, Mara slumped back against the wall, tears blurring her vision. Not from fear, but from something dangerously close to relief. I hear you, she said. Thank you. The team exchanged looks. Taking her out would mean breaking every rule they had. It would mean exposure, possible compromise, and the very real chance none of them would make it home. Reed keyed his mic to command. Before he could speak, Park shook his head. Sir, if we report this, they'll say no. Reed knew he was right. Command would calculate risk. Assets. Probability of success. One wounded officer wasn't worth 6 recon operators. Reed switched off the channel. We're going dark, he said. We're bringing her home. They moved fast as they closed the distance. The terrain grew more hostile. Narrow ravines, blind corners, evidence of recent patrols. Twice they had to freeze as enemy units passed within meters, boots crunching over the same dirt they were pressed into. Mara listened as the radio went silent again. She didn't know if they were coming. She didn't know if she'd imagined the voice. Her vision swam. Blood loss and exhaustion pulled at her consciousness like a tide. She forced herself to stay awake by reciting names. Every soldier she'd ever trained with, every mission she'd survived. When she heard the soft scrape of a boot against stone, she raised her weapon, finger trembling. A shape emerged from the shadows, slow and deliberate. Mara Hale, a voice whispered. Don't shoot. She blinked, trying to focus. 6 figures appeared around her, weapons raised outward, forming a protective circle. She laughed weakly. Took you long enough. Reed knelt beside her, eyes scanning her injuries with professional speed. You're safe now, he said. We've got you. Behind them, the desert listened. And it would not let them leave easily. If you're enjoying this powerful military survival story, subscribe to the channel Her Brave Stripes for more real courage, untold missions, and unforgettable heroines. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Your support means everything. Reed didn't waste time explaining. The moment Mara's rifle lowered, the perimeter tightened. Park and Alvarez took overwatch positions on the ridge. Knox checked the rear trail for trackers. The desert felt suddenly smaller, tighter, like it knew something had changed. Reed crouched beside Mara, his voice low and steady. Can you feel your foot? Barely, she said. Her face was pale, lips cracked, but her eyes were sharp. Still a soldier. Compound fracture. Been a few hours. Reed nodded once. We'll splint it. Then we move. She almost laughed again. You're not supposed to. He met her eyes. Yeah, I know. They worked fast. Park slid a collapsible splint into place, while Reed injected a controlled dose of pain suppressant. Just enough to dull the edge without knocking her out. Mara hissed, but stayed conscious, teeth clenched, as soon as they lifted her. Distant shouting carried on the wind. Knox froze. Contact. North Ridge. At least a squad. Reed swore under his breath. They were already hunting. Mara forced herself upright on the stretcher. They'll fan out. Dogs too, if they have time. Reed didn't ask how she knew. Her tone said everything. They moved. Every step was calculated. No straight lines. No unnecessary noise. Twice they had to stop and press into the dirt as enemy patrols passed, so close Mara could hear their breathing. At T1 point, a flare burst into the sky behind them, bathing the desert in harsh white light. Go, go. Reed whispered. They ran. Gunfire cracked the night open. Rounds snapped overhead, chewing into rock. Alvarez returned fire in short, disciplined bursts, not to kill, just to buy seconds. Seconds mattered. They reached a dry riverbed just as a mortar round exploded where they'd been moments before. The shock wave rolled them into the sand. Mara screamed as pain ripped through her leg. Reed was instantly there. Stay with me. Look at me. Her vision blurred, but she nodded. Sentinel 1 to any friendly asset, Reed transmitted. We are compromised. Carrying wounded officer. Request immediate extraction. Static, then negative. Airspace hot. No birds available. Reed clenched his jaw. He didn't repeat the request. They pushed deeper, moving toward an abandoned listening post marked on Reed's mental map. It was old, forgotten, but had walls. Cover. Enemy forces closed in fast. Mara felt it. The tightening ring, the inevitable collision. She'd been on the other side of this hunt before. She grabbed Reed's sleeve. They won't stop. You know that. I know. You need to leave me. He didn't answer. Sergeant, she said, forcing authority into her voice. That's an order. Reed finally looked at her, eyes hard. With respect, ma'am, no. The listening post came into view, half-buried concrete, with a single narrow entrance. They hauled Mara inside, just as bullets stitched the doorway. They were trapped, part-checked ammo. We can hold. Maybe 10 minutes. Extraction? Knox asked. Reed shook his head. Not coming. Silence fell, broken only by distant shouts and the scrape of boots. Mara pushed herself upright despite the pain. Then we make them think I'm not here. Reed turned. What? She reached for her radio, the same battered unit that had saved her once already. I call it in. I draw them off. That'll get you killed. Park snapped. She met his gaze calmly. I was already dead. Reed stared at her, torn. Outside, enemy voices grew louder. Closer. Mara keyed the mic. This is Iron Sparrow. I'm still alive. Reed grabbed her wrist. Stop. She shook her head gently. Thank you for not leaving me. Then she transmitted coordinates. False ones. Enemy fire shifted immediately, pulling away from the post. Reed understood instantly. You clever, stubborn, she smiled faintly. Go. They didn't argue anymore. They moved fast, slipping out the rear breach as enemy forces surged toward the wrong grid. Reed looked back once, memorizing the sight of her silhouette against the concrete. Then the post exploded. The blast rolled across the desert, swallowing sound and light. Reed dropped to his knees, breath gone from his lungs. But then, gunfire. Not enemy, clean, precise that a helicopter roared overhead, black and unmistakable. Friendly bird. Knox shouted. Chaos erupted. The Recon team fought their way back toward the smoke as air support tore through enemy lines. Reed ran toward the ruins, heart pounding. Mara, he shouted. From the dust, a figure crawled, burned. Bloody. Alive. She looked up at him, grinning through cracked lips. Told you radio still worked. They lifted her into the helicopter as dawn broke over the desert, painting the sky red and gold. Weeks later, in a quiet hospital room, Reed stood at attention as Mara, now in a brace, scars fresh, received a citation that would never be fully explained to the public. The report would say extraction successful. IT would never say they left her. IT would never say she refused to stay dead. And somewhere out there, a recon team would remember the night a wounded voice on a forgotten frequency reminded them what soldiers were supposed to do. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel Her Brave Stripes for more powerful stories of courage, sacrifice, and unbreakable women in uniform. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Your support helps these stories reach the world.